Good morning, good evening, and good afternoon to Internet Land. This is Funny Like a Clown Podcast. I'm your host, Dennis Wirth, episode 96, January 26, 2021. Getting out of 2020, a year we're all going to remember, good, bad, or otherwise. As always, Funny Clown Podcast brought to you by G Vegas Buffalo Sauce for the spicy, sweet, savory taste of game time. There's only one G Vegas available at www.gvegas.webs.com. Episode 96. We're creeping up on that 100th episode. I've already booked a very special guest. And speaking of special guests, we have a special lady on the phone here who has traveled to various places around the country doing stand-up comedy, made a name for herself on the Boston comedy scene, performing at some of the biggest names on that stage. Carolyn Plummer, welcome to the show.
It's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Well, I think you started comedy a few years before me, and well, how long have you been doing comedy for?
Since 1997.
97. Okay, so you started about a year before me, and all these years later, all the shows in Boston, and our paths have never crossed. So I said, well, I'll have her on the podcast, and now our paths have crossed.
I know, it's funny how that happens.
Yeah, you never know. So, how did you get started in comedy? Take us back to the beginning.
All right. Well, the beginning is I come from a family. My dad's a minister, and I'm the youngest. So that explains a lot. I did a lot of theater as a kid. And then just as I got older, I just really loved stand-up comedy. And I didn't know how to do it, had no idea how to get started. I was in college, and some of my friends encouraged me to pursue it. And so when I graduated, I was waiting tables, and I saw an ad in the paper for a
Were
comedy
you like the
class.
class clown in college? Is that why they encouraged you?
Yeah, I drank a lot too, but
That always
I
helps in comedy.
I was always getting in trouble for saying stuff in high school and in college, so it wasn't that much of a jump. I just didn't know how to do comedy. I've never pursued that, so I saw this ad in the paper for a class, and I was like, "You can take a class," and I had Wednesday off that week, so I called the guy, and he was like, "Oh, I'm teaching this class in my mom's condo," which I'm like, "Oh, that seems safe."
Being a
But he
girl,
ended
that's a
up
little
being a good
sketchy,
guy,
huh?
and I took the class. It was
Come
like,
in the basement. We're gonna set up a video for this, right?
yeah, exactly. So, but it ended up being fine. He's actually still one of my friends. And
Who is he? You want to know? You want to drop names or no? Who is he?
Dave McLaughlin. He doesn't do comedy much anymore. He's just
Okay.
acting. He was out in LA for a while.
So how was the class? Did he give a good class, or he must have? If you, I mean, this many years later, you're doing it, yeah.
Yeah, it was a good class. It taught you how to kind of write the jokes and put the funny at the end, and basically just gave me the confidence to get up on stage. And at the end of the class, we got to perform. And the night I performed, I was drunk. I still don't remember what I said. I got laughs. And I met George Ham from Maine, and George gave me a ton of stage time. And Dave encouraged me to keep doing it and gave me a bunch of names to do open mics, and I just kind of took off from there.
Off to the races. Okay. Now, you mentioned your father was a congressional minister. Were you like, did you rebel against that? Were you like a rebellious child, or did you embrace the religious upbringing?
I wasn't that rebellious, but I wasn't really. My parents got divorced, and it was ugly, and because it was in the church and everything. So it definitely. I went the other route. I have faith, but I'm not really into organized religion anymore.
Right.
So it kind of. I guess I rebelled a little bit, but I
So was
wasn't
comedy
like
a good release? You said, it was an ugly divorce. I mean, was comedy a good way for you to laugh about it?
Yeah, like I think that's how I just dealt with things in my life anyway.
Yeah, sure. I mean, comedy, they said, what, laughter's the best medicine, right? That's one of the big sayings in comedy. So, hey, I know I went through a bitter custody battle over my kid. If it wasn't for comedy, I'd probably be the next statistic. Who knows, But, so were there did you have any comedy heroes that, you watched some professional stand-ups and said, hey, I'd like to try it and be like that person? I mean, who were your heroes in comedy?
Yeah, I mean, I watched Evening at the Improv a lot. So I would see, like, I saw Steve Sweeney when he was out in LA.
The king.
Yeah, and he was doing impressions of, like, one of my favorite bits that he did when he was out in LA when he was really young was a bunch of impressions at the movie theater. So he did, like, Sir Laurence Olivier at the concession stand and Jack Nicholson, and it was just brilliant, really I was like in awe of him, and now I'm like, can't believe I shared the stage with him.
Starstruck, yeah.
So that was that was funny. Robin Williams, I loved Robin Williams in the 80s.
Genius. Yeah.
Obviously, what's his name? Oh, Eddie Murphy was big. We used to listen to the cassette of Delirious.
Yeah, I think we're about the same age, so I mean that was the one we grew up on. That was the first album that really hit it, really that you'd fill stadiums instead of comedy clubs with.
Yeah, exactly. And then, Dane Cook was on his way out of Boston when I started.
Right.
So I saw him a lot. I really liked his stand-up at the beginning. I don't know what he's doing now. I wouldn't describe it as stand-up. I'm more of a purist.
So you've seen him at some of the local comedy clubs before he hit it big, yeah?
Yeah, he would be at the Comedy Connection a lot in Boston,
Okay.
and then he'd come back and sell it out.
Yeah, I always thought it was cool just saying, it's like we're hitting some of the same stages that he used to perform on, so it can happen to anybody, right?
Yeah, and he would show up like at an open mic night to try new stuff. So it's super nice. And what he's done is phenomenal. Like, he figured out social media before any of us did.
Yeah, he was the original, to make that a big thing for him, yeah.
Yeah, you would admire him for that. Not a big fan of his new comedy, but I liked his old stuff when he used to talk about his family and stuff.
Yeah, the kids love him. It took me a while to catch on. I do like some of his stuff, but when I first started watching him, I'm like, I don't get this guy. But after a while, he kind of grows on you, yeah, but...
Yeah, he's definitely talented. I like more of like, Bob Newhart, old school, like...
Right.
Stephen Wright. I like comedy for different reasons. Some people just make me laugh, but other people, I'm like, look at the way they structured that joke. That's phenomenal. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
so
wordsmith, right? Genius, right?
Yeah. So it's a lot of different factors. And when Roseanne started, she was an innovator. You got to give her credit for that. I think she's crazy as a woman now, but I'm not here to judge.
You got to be a little crazy in this business, though. So I mean.
Yeah, but she was pretty big in the '90s.
Oh, sure. She had one of the biggest sitcoms on TV. We could all be so lucky, sure.
Yeah, and her stand-up was different. She was like crass and loud, and she got away with it. And Joan Rivers was the same.
Being a stay-at-home mom, just an art form right there. But yeah, you mentioned Steve Sweeney. I know. I did a local television show, and I'd ask, my friends in comedy, do you want to be on? All of a sudden, I landed. Steve Sweeney walked through the door. Then all of a sudden, I'm getting calls. Hey, can I get on that show? I'm like, hey, things are changing here. So funny how when you're working with people like that. I mean, who other than Steve, who are some of the big names you're working with in Boston comedy?
I went to the Marshall Islands with Lenny Clark to entertain the troops, which was the trip of a lifetime. It was hilarious. It's 18 hours to get there, so I got to know Lenny on that trip, and we're still friends.
Lenny's a great guy. I know. I was scared to meet him, and then he walks. He's just a normal guy, but that's what you think of your heroes. They think they're different. You find out they're not.
Yeah.
So what kind of shots did you have to take to go down there? Anything, or?
What?
Did you have to take any shots to go down there, like for health reasons before you traveled?
No, we didn't need any shots. He didn't need anything special.
Oh, you did nothing to go there. Oh, okay.
Yeah, but that was fun. It was you go to Hawaii and then you fly another like 6 hours to the middle of the Pacific, and then it's just hot and humid.
So were you stuck on base, or did you get to go out and like sightsee or anything?
Yeah, you can walk around the island probably in an hour. It's not very big.
Oh.
And it was one of the bloodiest battles of World War II. If you talk to Mike Donovan about it, he knows all about it.
Right.
So when it rains, like bullets come up out of the ground and stuff.
Oh, jeez.
We fought the Japanese there. It was pretty bloody. So there's a lot of stuff like that.
A lot of history over there, right? Yeah.
So, but it's beautiful. But there's like burned out.
Now, other than entertaining the troops, were there any comedy clubs over there? Is comedy a thing, or was it just for the troops? Could you like sneak off and go to a comedy?
Like we performed at the golf club, and we performed at the VFW, and then we went to another island and performed on that island. And it's actually, there's troops there. That's where the Ronald Reagan test site is, where we blow shit out of the sky. But it's mostly government contracted employees. So we met people from like MIT.
Oh.
We walked in to meet the colonel, and this kid was there from South Boston. He was like, Lenny Clark.
Wow.
So,
rubbing elbows with the big.
From South Boston.
So, I mean, you said you've traveled a lot of places. Other than there, what are some of the fun places you traveled to? Where would you like to go back to?
Been out to Burbank a couple times and performed out there. I really like it out there.
How'd you do out there? Did they get the Boston humor?
Yeah, I didn't. I mean, I obviously didn't do my Boston centric stuff, but
Okay.
I went out one year. I went out for the festival, and I got best of the festival. I got to perform at the end, and then this year they were virtual, obviously. But I went last year again and had an even better trip. Made a bunch of friends.
Do you enjoy doing the festivals? I mean, how many festivals have you done? Because I mean, I found even comedy contests. I found most of them are fixed. I mean, you do it to get seen, but I mean, your odds of winning ain't very good. Most of them are rigged, from what I've seen.
Well, the festivals, like that festival, isn't. You don't win anything.
No, okay, it's not a.
So you go out to network. Like I went to a bunch of panels. I met some agents. I met some managers, and you learn about the business. And the business in California obviously is different than here because there's television and movies and
Right.
stuff like that. So it was. I learned a lot, and I learned a lot about social media. To be honest, the first time I went there because I wasn't great at social
Yeah,
media.
world's at your fingertips nowadays. I mean, back in the day, you had to sell the house and move to LA or New York. I mean, nowadays you can be a star anywhere with the internet. Yeah.
Yeah, and you have to be visible on the internet because they look at that. Like if
Oh.
anybody wanted to sign you, I'm not saying that anybody wants to sign me, but if anybody wanted to sign you, they're going to look at your social media presence and see,
Yeah.
what you're doing. If people know you, if you have followers, all that shit matters. It shouldn't, but it does.
Oh yeah, I've always said there's three sides of comedy. There's the business side, the political side, and the being funny side. And the funny side always comes in last. Unfortunately, it's more who you know and what business can you bring to the club, or what you know. It's less to do with what's funny. I mean, it shouldn't be. Being funny should be first, but it's not always the
Exactly.
way it is, unfortunately.
But yeah, I was worried that I'd go out there and they wouldn't get my humor, and it ended up being fine. So I liked that. Burbank was fun. I would go out there again when we can travel safely and whatnot. I've been to Pennsylvania, which was weird, but
Pennsylvania.
it was fun. I've done a lot in New England, like all over
Yeah,
New England.
Pennsylvania's kind of nutty like Boston. Yeah, I did Vegas one time. After my set, somebody yelled out, "Why are you so angry?" Or no, I'm like, "Oh, where are you from?" I'm like, "I'm from Boston." Oh, okay, okay. Like that explained it why I was so angry, just because I was from Boston. They got it after I said that. Okay, but not everybody's crazy like us. I don't know.
No, I dabbled in New York a little bit, but I don't want to live there.
Well, what was it like for you on the New York scene? Well, I saw you did Dangerfields. Yeah, I went down there. That was, geez, that's a historic club. You're like walking into the '70s when you walk into that place. But I mean,
Yeah, I think there's dust from the 70s still in there.
yeah, it was funny.
Um,
But other than that, what other places you hit down in New York?
a long time ago, I did the comic strip.
Yeah,
Dangerfield was fun though.
yeah. Like it's like a trip back in time. Dangerfields was. And then I performed at the Gotham, and that's like a state of the art. Like it was just crazy. All the stuff they had going on there. It was like a state of the art establishment. It was going one extreme to the other. I was like, but it's a fun scene. Like you said, it's not someplace I'd want to stay. I mean,
Yeah, I
yeah.
performed at Gotham when I tried out for. I got a call back to Last Comic Standing, so I went and auditioned, and it was at Gotham.
Oh, there you go.
And they didn't pick me, obviously, but Wanda Sykes was there. She was the year she was a producer.
Well, rumor has it that's all rigged anyway. You need an agent to get on Last Comic Standing. That all those lines they do are just for TV to show like, oh, everybody's got a chance. But
Yeah, I didn't wait in line. I did an audition.
you didn't have to wait in line.
And then producers reached out to me.
Yeah, I did that once for America's Got Talent. I stood in line all day and said, you know what, this wasn't worth it. I mean, it was fun doing once, but I would not do it again. Yeah, it was.
Yeah, the line doesn't mean I didn't wait in line. I did an audition in front of producers, and then the producers called me and had me. They paid for me to go to New York.
Oh, there you go.
But ultimately, I didn't get picked. But Wanda Sykes liked all my jokes, which was great. She laughed in all
That
the right
counts.
places.
Yeah. Yeah, I was at the Gotham. I didn't know what Jim Gaffigan and Jerry Seinfeld. They were on the early show, and I was on the late show. I didn't even know it. I'm just standing there in the green room, looking at my phone. I look up. I'm standing next to Jerry Seinfeld and Jim Gaffigan. I'm like, okay, something's going on here. It's one of those moments, like don't expect to bump into them, but I did.
Yeah, that's the cool part.
Yeah, those are the cool parts. So I'm a big mouth in comedy. I don't know if you are or not, but you don't have to mention any names. I mean, you met a lot of cool people in comedy. Have you met any pricks who kind of tried to kick you down, or?
No, I haven't really had that experience. I get along with most people, and I kind of stay out of the drama. So for me, it's been a really good ride.
It's been a good
And
experience.
like as far as like the Me Too movement and all that stuff,
Yeah.
I worked in food service for years, and I would say that that's worse than comedy, in my opinion,
Yeah.
as far as like sexual harassment and stuff like that. But again, I don't really get into that. You know?
Yeah, I crossed over into the booker. I do comedy/booker, and that booker part turns into a whole headache in itself. Or
yeah, like I don't want to be a booker. I've booked some shows because
Yeah.
people have asked me to, but I don't ever want to be a booker.
Yeah, that's a whole
understand
new
that.
area. It's tough, yeah. Because I think, well, one of the first, before I started doing comedy, I remember I had cable TV, and you could go in the menu there, and I think it was Dick Doherty had, it was on cable TV. You could see like local comedians. You could like go to that part of your cable access, and I think your routine was one of the ones that I saw on there.
Yep, I was on that.
And I think
that was the weirdest thing too, because when they filmed it at the vault, and they gave you a microphone, but the microphone wasn't live. They had sound.
I think you told me that because this was back when MySpace was a thing. After I seen it, I found you on MySpace and I messaged you, and you told me your timing was off because it was
you couldn't hear, it was no live mic. It was weird.
So how did they do it if it wasn't a live mic? It was just.
You were doing stand up. There was an audience, but it wasn't amplified, so it was just a dead mic. So you're basically just talking like we're talking.
So could they hear you, the audience, or?
You could hear the audience. They were mic'd up too, but the way they needed the microphone to be not live because of the way they were using different microphones.
Sound is everything. I know I do a podcast, that's for sure. Okay. So all your years in comedy, if you had to pick a high point, what would you say a high point is in comedy that you're most proud of?
Oh, wow. That's tough.
A lot of fun times, but there can only be one best, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think going to Burbank the first time and having my jokes work
right.
Was a big wake-up call for me because I've been in New England for so long that I was like, here I am on the very, farthest away, the West Coast, and I'm still getting laughs.
Yeah.
So that was a big turning
moment
point for me because I was like, okay, I can go to other places and still.
I can go anywhere now and get it done, yeah. Because not everybody gets Boston jokes. It's a scene, That,
the thing that I've learned about the people I've met, they're like, you guys tell your jokes fast. And I go, what do you mean? Because in California, they'll meander and meander and meander, and there's no payoff at the end. So, like, you tell the setup and the punch, and then you just go on to the next thing. I said, yeah, because we have to. Because we're telling jokes. People are loud. People are talking. You got to make sure you can get in and out of that and navigate all of that. I go, you got to take your time. Like, not everybody's stoned in life.
Right.
I don't know. We just have a different style than they do.
Yeah, and coming up, sometimes you'll play bars where half the crowd's there to listen and half the crowd's there to drink, and you got to win over that half that's not there to listen to you. And quick will do it. You get into a long story, they don't want to listen to you,
Yeah, you got to get their attention and keep it. And that's the difference, I think, between not all California comics, obviously, but there's a lot of them that just kind of meander and like, oh my God, like, what are you talking about?
Yeah. Well, I remember I was on the open mic scene. I asked everybody, what are your goals in comedy? And the one I heard more than anything, I want to work with Lenny because we're in Boston. He's the top of the Boston comedy chain. So that became my goal, to work with Lenny. Then finally I worked with him. It's like, all right, what do I do now? That was the goal, to work with Lenny. I did that. I didn't know where to go after that. So it was, it's I guess traveling, yeah, but ain't much traveling anymore with this pandemic. How's that hit your comedy?
Oh, comedy ended in March. Comedy just stopped.
Yeah.
I had a huge spring booked. I had a bunch of corporate gigs, and financially I took a huge hit.
We all did.
And then I started questioning, have I picked the wrong path in life? Should I be doing something else? Like, did I waste my time? It was a big come to Jesus moment for the next few months. And then ultimately I did a couple shows, outdoor shows. Things started to come back and had some really good shows.
Did you enjoy the outdoor shows, or?
The ones I did were great, yeah.
Yeah, because what is it? If they honk their horn, that's considered a clap, or if they flash their lights, that's like an ovation or something, or?
No, not at all. I did, up in New Hampshire, I did the Tupelo Music Hall.
Okay.
And it was outside, and they set it up. People could sit in their cars, or they could sit outside of their cars. A lot of people came in trucks and sat, and you could hear the audience.
Yeah.
They weren't honking horns. They weren't all in their
Yeah, well,
cars.
the laws have changed since then. I know I did an outside show too where you could have people around, and I think that was when you could have up to 50 people outside, which 50 that ain't bad. Then they cut it down to 10, so it's like 10. That's not even an audience. You got the 4 or 5 comics, but you got 5 people. You can't do that. So the only way
they were
around.
the first ones to get their license, so I did it in June, and they said they were a drive-in basically. So people would drive in and they would get the spot next to them.
Right.
And the spot for their car, so they could sit in the spot next to the
Oh,
car.
I see, like lawn chairs or something.
Yeah, and then like an outdoor concert type thing.
Were you
and
yelling
then
at them,
one
though?
at a campground that I thought would be horrible, and it was like one of the best shows I did this year.
Really? Because, I mean, I imagine the stage has to be so far from the crowd, right? Are you like yelling at the crowd, or?
No, they did everything right there. Like, I can't say enough about the Tupelo and Scott who owns it, because they switched out the mics, they sanitized the mics, the sound was phenomenal. I mean, you didn't get this, you can't, it's not like when people are inside, but you could hear them. You were close enough you could hear the people.
That's half the thing. You want the audience as close to you, because if you get the people in front of you laughing, then the laughter carries, when you got nobody in front of you, it's like...
Yeah, so that was
a different
good.
game,
and then
but...
I did, I've done some theater shows inside before I went down to the Cape in Old Saybrook, Connecticut, which is one of my favorite places to perform. And they were at, I think, 50% capacity. It seats about 350, I think.
Yeah.
No, it seats about 1,500. And I forget what the capacity was, but they had to wear masks inside, and there weren't a lot of people there. And it was still, again, one of the best shows I've had this year, because everybody in Connecticut hadn't been out.
Yeah, everybody wants to laugh. Yeah, gee, we're looking for something to do.
Yeah, and it was great.
Yeah.
And I mentioned this fish restaurant that I've been to, and someone in the audience was talking to a newspaper, and they mentioned that I had mentioned it at a show, and the restaurant sent me a gift certificate.
Oh.
Because they're
free
like,
promotion.
you gave us free advertising.
Free
I
advertising.
don't remember saying that, but thank you.
So, I mean, did you have a regular job on the side, or was comedy all you were doing for a while?
I have a job that I was gonna go into the ships this year and not have a job, and that didn't work out.
So you weren't on the streets when comedy took the dive there. You weren't on the streets. You had a regular job to fall back on, right?
Exactly.
Well, that's good. No, that's okay. So, I mean, what do you think makes a good comic? Out of all the comics you've seen, what makes you look at them and say, hey, I think they're a good comic?
Well, I mean, comedy's relative, obviously. Like, someone can be a great comic and you don't like their comedy.
Right.
But I think a good comic is someone that takes into account the vibe in the room, the crowd, and the direction of the comedy. Like, if you're doing all this political stuff and no one is getting it and no one's following along, you got to be able to change gears. And I've seen comics go up and do the same joke the same way every single time they're on stage.
Right.
And it's not the same. Like, the energy's different. Like, you have to take into account all of that. And that's a good comic. Someone that can think on their feet, change things on the fly, and really read the audience.
Every crowd's different. Wouldn't be no fun if every crowd was the same. Yeah, that's half the fun, is can I win this crowd over, yeah. So, I mean, have you ever offered advice to some of the young comics, or do you not try to do it, or?
It depends if I like them or not. There's this kid, Matt Brown. He's now in L.A.
Yeah.
But he was a good kid, and he wanted to learn about comedy, and we ended up being friends. And he just wanted to learn and wanted to put in the work. And
that's rare to find.
I kind of helped him and introduced him to some people because he got it. You know what I mean? Like, he was still green and needed a lot of work, but he got it. And he's like, I'm moving to LA. I said, good. You can develop as a comic in LA too. You don't have to stay in Boston.
Most of these kids, they think they know everything. I've been asked, hey, can you give me some advice? And I tried to, and they get combative with me. It's like, well, why'd you ask me? If you know everything, what are you asking me for?
Yeah, those are the ones I won't help. But he didn't ask for help. I just ended up helping. I did a lot of. He and I did a lot of shows for Dick Doherty, so he was working the door, and I was like, hey, like I'd just be like, hey, why don't you try this when you tell that joke? Hey, I tried that thing, and it was really good, and it worked, and I'm gonna keep it. I said, good, because a lot of people helped me with that when I was starting out. Like Don Gavin would give me tags for my jokes. every single tag he gave me was brilliant.
Yeah, he's
You
a
know, he
genius,
didn't have
Don.
to do that.
He's the original godfather of Boston comedy. You don't call him that for
Oh
nothing.
my God,
Yeah.
he's the best. He didn't have to help me. I said, why are you helping me? He goes, because I like you. If I didn't like you, I wouldn't even be talking to you.
Yeah, I see. It's kind of a responsibility when you're a veteran comic to give back to bring the next generation forward. I always said Rodney Dangerfield did that. For as great a comic as he was, he brought us, the Roseanne Barrs and the Sam Kinnisons and all the big names. He brought them up, he gave them their break. So it's always good to give back if people want to listen. I've run successful shows for 10 years now, and I got these kids, hitting open mics. You should do this, you should do this. So like, well, what are you doing? You should be telling me how I should be doing anything. But
Oh,
that's
yeah,
the
they've got all
craziness of
the
the
answers.
business. Of course they do. What would you say? I mean, if you were going to give a young comic some advice, what is something to avoid in the business? If you said these are the things you want to avoid, what would you tell somebody to avoid in the business?
I would say this just for life anyway, but in comedy especially, be nice to everyone. You never know who you're talking to, number one. Number two, put the work in. You're not going to be, if you are successful overnight, you have to be able to maintain that. So put the work in. You're not going to be the next Dane Cook and just rip it every single time.
That's
you got
a
to
good
put the
one.
work
Yeah.
in.
Hand it to me on a silver platter. That's what they want. Just give it to me.
Yeah, but that's their generation. They don't want to put the work in for anything.
No, I know. I get that a lot. They just, you should book me on that show. I'm like, well, I got like 10 other comics who've been busting their ass before you to get it. What are you doing that you deserve it before them,
Well, that's the mentality of the whole helicopter parenting, and everyone gets a trophy. Like, you should earn stuff. You shouldn't be given stuff.
It's a whole new day and age than we grew up in, that's for sure. So I mean, what do you think the future of comedy is with the pandemic now that this has hit? I mean, obviously, comedy never dies. Someday we'll be back. But I mean, what do you think? Do you think it'll be sooner rather than later, or do we get a long wait? Or
I think we have to get the vaccine done first for people to feel comfortable and to go out and just be able to let loose. The shows that I have done during the pandemic have been great. I've actually developed myself to be able to do Zoom shows successffully. That took a long time because I don't like it. But
that's different. How is an online show? I thought about doing it, and I'm like, that's just, I don't know. I backed out. I was like, I don't know if that's for me or not. But some people are enjoying them. I see the comedy studios doing them regular, and they've been successful.
I've done a couple for them. I just did a corporate one where a friend of mine called me, and they wanted me to bomb their Zoom call and then do stand-up. So I kind of went into it as I pretended to be a new employee, and I researched what they do for work, and I said, I used to work in this type of technology, but you guys do this, and they loved it. And I got paid pretty well for that. So, you just reinvent yourself. That's what we do anyway, right?
You do what you got to do, I guess. Yeah.
I think when comedy does come back, I don't know when exactly it'll be. Hopefully sooner than later.
Yeah.
I think people will be so appreciative that it'll be great.
Yeah, everybody needs something to laugh about, but I mean, I think up in the big city, the young kids, they're more daring and, they don't take this virus seriously anyway. So I think the big city, the kids will be coming out sooner, but I'm out here in Central Mass in the suburbs, and I mean, even the older people come out, even when they tell them it's okay, they're still going to be skeptical to do it. So I think it's going to be a while for me out here before I'm back up and going, but I don't know. I mean, I'm hoping people still want laughter, but it's a tough road to follow.
I mean, because I was just at comics at Mohegan Sun, and I was like, I don't know if I want to go to a casino, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
The showroom itself is huge, so I knew that I'd be safe there, but you got to walk through the casino to get there. It ended up being great.
Really?
And I was surprised. Did people want to be out? Like, I was talking about when it first came out, because it was just me and Kelly McFarland. So it's just the two of us. So I was the opener. And so I came out and I said, isn't it nice to have somewhere to go? Like, I got in my car and I drove here.
Yeah.
And I had somewhere to be, and everyone applauded.
Yeah, people are sick of sitting home, that's for sure. Do they want to take the risk and go out, I guess is the question. But I guess if it's working, if the places that are doing it, I mean, if they're filling seats, then apparently people are ready to go out, yeah.
Yeah, all the shows were sold out. I mean, they're not full capacity, but it was still fun. It felt like regular comedy again.
Yeah,
and everyone had masks on.
You get back on stage and do what you love to do. There's nothing like that. So, Well, we talked about how you got started. We talked about what you've done. I mean, what's in the future when things do get back to normal? I mean, what are your goals in comedy? Is there anything left you want to accomplish you haven't, or what's the high point of your comedy career? What do you want it to be?
Well, that's a good question. I used to want to be famous, but now I think that ship has sailed.
Right.
Who knows? It's all about timing and where you're at, and
Right place, right time.
Who you can connect with. So I guess it's just if I can keep doing this and still make people laugh
right.
as I get older, I'm fine with that, because I had to do a lot of soul searching, like I said, at the beginning of the pandemic.
Yeah.
And I realized now this is what I'm meant to do. Like, I can't imagine not doing it.
Right. You'd lose so much of your life without it in it, yeah.
Yeah, well, I didn't have it for so long, and I was like,
but I mean,
I really miss it.
Is it just stand-up that interests you, or I mean, would you like to have a sitcom like a Roseanne, or would you like to have a talk show like The Tonight Show or something like that? I mean, are there other parts of comedy that interest you?
If that came down the pike, I would love to do that. I actually, I went to school for writing, so writing is like a big thing that I want to do. And if I should have written the screenplay that I have an idea for, but I just haven't. I haven't gotten it out on paper because I've never written a screenplay before. But I would love to pitch a sitcom to someone and be on a sitcom. That would be great.
Well, you'd be a writer if you were a writer for The Tonight Show or something. If you're a good enough writer, you could write jokes or something like that, or I mean.
Yeah, I mean, I'd be a writer, but I also would want to be in front of it.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. Well, that's how you get your foot in the door. Like Conan O'Brien, he was a writer before he got his own show, but I mean, I got his foot in the door was writing, so. I mean, have you ever considered doing anything locally, like a local television show or something like that, or?
I mean, I've done a bunch of local stuff.
I mean, you have your own show, not be on somebody else's. I mean.
Oh yeah, no. I haven't thought about that.
No. Well, hopefully we can see a screenplay from you in the future.
I know.
Who knows? Well, hopefully someday our paths cross here on the comedy scene when things get back to normal. But anything else we should know about Carolyn Plummer Comedy? Or I mean, if people want to check you out, you want to plug your website here? Where would they go?
Yeah, my website is www.carolynplummer.com, and I'm going to be at the Music Hall on February 13th with Mike McDonald, Jimmy Tingle, and Paul D'Angelo. That's going to be a fun show.
There's some big shoes to fill right there. You nervous?
No, I did a show before with Mike, and Eddie Brill was on it, this kid out of New York, and Paul D'Angelo. We had a blast.
Yeah, I just had Eddie Brill was the last guest on the podcast. You're following Eddie Brill here. That's good stuff.
I did follow Eddie one night.
Well, you just did it again on my podcast, so thank you very much for being on, Carolyn. I mean, like I said, I hope when things get back to normal, we can work together someday, because I'd love to see your act.
Yep.
Anything else we should know about you before we go?
No, just get out and go when we can go. Just get out and support live comedy.
Get out and support
when we
comedy.
can go safely.
That's right. Let's hope we'll get back to laughing soon. All right, thanks for calling in, and we'll talk to you soon, okay?
All right, sounds good.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye.
All right, comedian Carolyn Plummer, one of the funny gals on the Boston comedy scene, working with the biggest names in Boston comedy, and there's a reason for that, because you're one funny girl. You don't just get to work with anybody in this thing. Like she said, you had to earn it, and she obviously earned it if she's on all these big shows with all these big names, and, that's a great point, I mean, everybody's been sitting home too long, and I think, if you can be safe about it, okay, and put on a safe show where you're limited capacity, I mean, there's things in place. We all need to get out and support comedy and bring it back, because if we all sit home, we're just going to stir crazy. So as long as things are safe, please get out there and support us. Support Carolyn. Support all comedy. This is Funny Like a Clown Podcast. I'm your host, Dennis Wirth. Until next time, if you can't laugh, out at a club at the moment because of the pandemic, laugh at home. Tell your family a joke. Keep your spirits up until we can get back. And when we get back, get out there, and I'll see you there. Good night.